My parents sold my savings to fund my brother's wedding, so I moved out silently, and what I did next left them in complete shock. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, my family's favorite word for me was mature. They said it like it was a compliment, but it always felt more like a quiet expectation I was never allowed to drop. While other kids were allowed to be loud, reckless, or emotional, I learned early that my job was to stay calm, predictable, and useful. My parents leaned on me for everything that required stability. Good grades were assumed, not praised. Obedience wasn't optional, it was just who I was. If something went wrong in the house, I was the one expected to fix it or at least not make it worse. I remember my mom once saying, "We don't worry about you, you'll figure it out," and at the time, I thought that meant trust. Now I realize it meant I was invisible. My younger brother was the opposite. He was charming, impulsive, always getting into trouble that somehow never stuck to him. If he failed a class, it was because the teacher didn't understand him. If he messed up, my dad would laugh and say, "That's just how he is." I'd sit there silently, watching him get defended, comforted, even celebrated for things I would have been punished for. I was expected to sacrifice without being asked. If something needed to be given up, it was always mine. Time, comfort, opportunities, it was understood that I'd adjust. Meanwhile, my brother could do the bare minimum and still be treated like he was exceptional. Somewhere along the way, I learned that love in my family wasn't unconditional. It was transactional. You were valued based on how little trouble you caused and how much you could carry without complaining. I told myself this was normal, that responsibility was just part of growing up. That belief followed me into every decision I made, especially when it came to money. I didn't spend, I saved. I didn't ask, I provided. I thought being dependable would protect me. I didn't realize it was quietly turning me into the family's safest resource to use. I started working when I was still a teenager, taking whatever jobs I could get because earning my own money made me feel grounded. While my friends spent their paychecks on weekends out or impulse buys, I watched my balance grow slowly, almost obsessively. Saving felt like control. It felt like protection. In a family where I was only valued for being reliable, money became the one thing I believed could never be taken from me. My parents helped me open my first savings account, and I remember how proud they sounded when they talked about it. My dad said, "You're smart for your age," and my mom added, "This is how you build a future." At the time, those words meant everything to me. I trusted them completely. They had access to the account, framed as guidance, not control, and I didn't question it because questioning things wasn't something I'd ever been encouraged to do. I skipped vacations without complaint. When friends invited me out, I'd say, "Maybe next time," and transfer the money instead. I remember sitting in my room late at night, the glow of my phone lighting up the numbers on the screen, feeling oddly proud of myself. That balance represented years of discipline, sacrifice, and saying no when it would have been easier to say yes. My parents praised me for it constantly. "You're thinking long-term," my mom would say. Sometimes she'd add, "This will help the family one day," but I never stopped to ask what that meant. I assumed it was just something parents said. After all, I wasn't being asked for anything. Not yet. I believed that being financially responsible would finally earn me something I'd been chasing my whole life: respect, fairness, maybe even security. I told myself that this money was mine, that it was safe because it existed on paper, in numbers, under my name. I didn't realize how fragile that sense of safety was. And I definitely didn't realize how closely my parents were watching it grow. Things started to shift the moment my brother announced he was getting married. I still remember him walking into the living room, grinning like he'd just won something, and saying, "So, I'm engaged." My mom gasped, hands flying to her mouth. My dad stood up immediately and hugged him. The room filled with excitement so fast it felt like the air changed. From that day on, nothing else mattered. Every conversation turned into wedding talk, venues, guest lists, decor, colors, food. My mom spent hours scrolling through her phone at the kitchen table, showing me pictures and asking, "Does this look classy enough?" My dad started making comments about how this wedding had to be perfect, how it was a reflection of our family. No one asked how much it would cost. It was like money was suddenly an abstract concept. I sat there listening, nodding when expected, feeling that familiar tightness in my chest. The more details they planned, the bigger everything got. The venue my brother wanted was expensive. The guest list kept growing. The word budget never came up, and somehow, that scared me more than if it had. Then the comments started. Small at first. "Everyone needs to make sacrifices for family milestones," my mom said one night, not looking at me directly. Another time my dad joked, "Good thing we have at least one responsible kid." They laughed. I forced a smile. I began to feel this quiet pressure, like a hand slowly tightening around my throat. No one asked me outright for help, but it felt implied, like my role was already decided. I noticed my parents becoming strangely vague whenever I mentioned my savings, brushing it off with, "Don't worry about that right now." At night, I lay in bed replaying conversations, telling myself I was being dramatic. They hadn't asked for anything. I was just projecting old patterns onto a new situation. Still, something felt off. My instincts were whispering, but years of conditioning told me to ignore them. The wedding kept getting bigger. And so did the uneasy feeling that I was about to pay for it in a way no one had bothered to discuss with me. The first red flag was subtle enough that I almost laughed it off. I logged into my account one afternoon, the familiar numbers loading on my screen, and for a second I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. The balance looked slightly off. Not drastically. Just enough to make my stomach tighten. I asked my mom about it casually while she was chopping vegetables for dinner. "Hey, did something change with my account?" I tried to sound relaxed, like it didn't really matter. She didn't even look up. "Oh, it's probably just a processing thing," she said. "You worry too much." When I brought it up again a few days later, this time to my dad, his response was sharper. "Why are you checking it so often?" he asked, frowning. "You've always been so paranoid about money." The word paranoid hit harder than it should have. I felt embarrassed, like I'd crossed some invisible line by paying attention to my own savings. After that, every question I asked was met with deflection. "Now's not a good time," my mom would say. Or, "You should trust us." Once, when I pushed a little harder, she sighed dramatically and said, "I can't believe you'd be this selfish when your brother is starting his life." That word again. Selfish. It carried so much weight in my family. It was the fastest way to shut me up, and it worked. I felt guilty for even asking, like I was ruining something joyful by being difficult. I started telling myself I was overreacting, that I was letting old insecurities distort reality. Still, the unease didn't go away. I noticed how quickly the subject changed whenever finances came up. How my parents exchanged looks before answering simple questions. How my brother avoided me entirely, suddenly too busy to talk. At night, I lay awake listening to the hum of the house, replaying every conversation. Part of me wanted to demand clarity. Another part, the part I'd been trained to obey, kept whispering, "Don't rock the boat." So I stayed quiet. I chose discomfort over confrontation. I convinced myself that silence was maturity, that patience was strength. I didn't realize that by saying nothing, I was giving them permission. And whatever they were doing with my money, it was already too late to stop it. I found out by accident. I wasn't even looking for anything suspicious, I just needed to transfer money for a routine payment. I opened my banking app while sitting in my car, the engine still running, the late afternoon sun glaring off the windshield. When the balance loaded, my chest went cold. A huge portion of my savings was gone. Not a small dip. Not a temporary hold. Gone. I refreshed the app. Logged out. Logged back in. My hand started shaking as the same number stared back at me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Years of skipped meals, missed trips, late nights working, it all collapsed into that single moment. I sat there whispering, "No, no, this isn't right," like saying it out loud might fix it. I walked into the house and asked my parents to sit down. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too calm for how violently I was unraveling inside. "There's a big chunk missing from my savings," I said. "Did the bank make a mistake?" They exchanged a glance. Not confusion. Not surprise. Just confirmation. My mom sighed first. "We were going to tell you," she said softly, like she was talking to a child. My dad crossed his arms. "We needed it," he added. "Your brother's wedding was getting expensive." I stared at them. "You took it?" I asked. "Without asking me?" My mom frowned. "Don't make it sound like that. It's family money." "It's my money," I said, my voice cracking despite my effort to keep it steady. My dad shook his head. "You're being dramatic. We'll figure it out later. Right now, your brother's big day matters more." Something inside me snapped, not loudly, but completely. They weren't apologizing. They weren't explaining. They were justifying it, like this was always how it was supposed to go. I stood there realizing that my savings, my safety net, the one thing I thought I owned, had never really been mine in their eyes. And as they kept talking about flowers and guest lists, I understood something terrifying. They didn't think they'd done anything wrong. They thought I'd just accept it. After that conversation, I clung to one fragile idea just to stay functional: they'll pay it back. I told myself it was temporary, that once the wedding was over, we'd sit down like adults and make a plan. That belief was the only thing keeping my anger from spilling over into something uncontrollable. A few days later, I brought it up again. Carefully. Calmly. I said, "I need to know when I'm getting my savings back. Even a timeline would help." My voice was steady, but inside I was begging. My dad didn't hesitate. He leaned back in his chair and said, "You're young. You can earn it again." My mom nodded, like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. "Your brother needs this more than you do right now," she added. "You're better at rebuilding." That's when it hit me. There was no plan. No repayment. No acknowledgement of what they'd taken. They weren't postponing giving it back, they had already decided I didn't deserve it. I felt my face heat up. "So, you're not paying me back?" I asked. Saying the words made them real in a way I wasn't ready for. My mom frowned, irritated now. "Why are you being so obsessed with money?" My dad snapped, "You're acting like we stole from you." I laughed once, short and hollow. "You did." That's when my brother finally spoke. He'd been sitting there scrolling on his phone the whole time. Without even looking up, he said, "I assumed you'd be okay with it. You're always okay with stuff." That sentence broke something open in me. It explained everything. The sacrifices. The silence. The entitlement. I wasn't a son or a brother, I was a buffer. A backup plan. A resource. They didn't see my savings as something to return. They saw it as something I owed for existing in the family without causing problems. I went to my room and shut the door, my hands trembling. The house felt smaller, heavier, like the walls were closing in. For the first time in my life, I understood that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was the role they had assigned me permanently. And suddenly, the question wasn't how do I get my money back. It was how do I get out without losing myself completely. After that, the tone in the house shifted completely. It wasn't loud arguments or explosive fights, it was worse. It was constant pressure, subtle and relentless, like being slowly crushed under something invisible. Every time I tried to bring up what they'd done, the conversation somehow turned into an attack on me. My mom would sigh dramatically and say, "I can't believe money matters more to you than family." My dad followed it with, "We raised you better than this." Better. As if obedience was morality. They started looping other people into it too. My aunt called me one evening and said, "Your parents are heartbroken. They say you're stressing them out." Stressing them out, after draining my savings without permission. I sat on my bed holding the phone, staring at the wall, wondering how the story had been rewritten so quickly. My brother leaned into it the hardest. He'd smirk and say things like, "You're really gonna ruin my wedding over money?" Or, "Must be nice to only think about yourself." The irony burned so badly it made my chest ache. I wanted to scream that I had thought about everyone but myself my entire life, but every time I tried to speak, my words tangled up in years of guilt. Every conversation left me drained. I'd walk away replaying their voices in my head, questioning my own reactions. Am I overreacting? Am I being selfish? That's the part that scared me most, how easily they made me doubt myself. I stopped sleeping properly. I'd lie awake listening to footsteps in the hallway, feeling like I was trapped in a house where reality kept shifting. My stomach was constantly tight, like I was bracing for impact that never came but was always implied. The more I tried to assert myself, the colder they became. Affection disappeared. Silence replaced conversation. It felt like punishment for daring to want something back that was mine. And in that emotional isolation, something finally clicked. They weren't going to stop. They weren't going to feel bad. And if I stayed, they would keep taking, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of me to defend. The night I hit rock bottom didn't come with drama or shouting. It came quietly, the way real breakdowns usually do. I was sitting on the floor of my room, back against the bed, laptop open in front of me, staring at my account again like it might magically change if I looked long enough. It didn't. The number was real. The damage was done. I remember feeling hollow more than angry. Like something vital had been scooped out of me and replaced with air. This money wasn't just savings, it was proof of my discipline, my restraint, my belief that doing the right thing would protect me. Seeing it gone made me feel stupid for ever believing that. I tried talking to my parents one last time that night. Not to argue, just to be honest. "I don't feel safe anymore," I said quietly. My mom didn't even look up from her phone. "You're being dramatic," she replied. My dad sighed and said, "You'll get over it. You always do." That sentence hurt more than anything else. You always do. Like my pain had an expiration date. Like it didn't matter because I'd learned how to swallow it. I went back to my room and closed the door. The house felt hostile in a way I couldn't explain, every sound too loud, every silence too heavy. I realized I didn't just lose my money. I lost the illusion that I belonged here. I couldn't sleep. My thoughts spiraled into dark places. What if I can't recover? What if this is it? What if I really am just here to be used? I felt embarrassed for being this broken at 26, for letting it get this far without pushing back sooner. That's when it hit me, no one was coming to fix this. No apology was coming. No repayment. No moment where they'd suddenly understand. I was alone in a house full of people who benefited from my silence. And lying there in the dark, heart racing, chest tight, I realized something terrifying but strangely clarifying. If I stayed, this would be my life forever. And that meant I had to start thinking about leaving, even if I had no idea how. Once the decision settled in my chest, something inside me went eerily quiet. The anger didn't disappear, but it stopped spilling everywhere. It turned inward, sharpened, and became focus. I didn't announce anything. I didn't threaten to leave or demand change. I just stopped explaining myself. I started observing instead. I noticed how my parents still assumed I'd be around to help, how my mom would casually say, "You can handle this, right?" without even asking. My brother kept acting like nothing had happened, complaining about wedding stress as if I were his unpaid therapist. Every word confirmed I was making the right choice. At night, I began planning. I gathered my documents, ID, bank statements, contracts, and hid them in a folder in my backpack. I changed passwords quietly, sitting in my car so no one could look over my shoulder. I opened a new account they had no access to and rerouted my income there. Each small step felt surreal, like I was sneaking out of my own life. I stopped contributing in subtle ways. I was suddenly busy when asked for favors. I kept conversations short. My parents seemed pleased, mistaking my emotional distance for acceptance. My mom even smiled one evening and said, "See? I knew you'd come around." That comment almost broke me. They really thought silence meant surrender. Packing was the hardest part. I did it slowly, one drawer at a time, folding clothes with shaking hands, trying not to make noise. Every item I touched held a memory, years of trying to be good enough, small enough, helpful enough. I remember standing in my room late one night, surrounded by half-packed boxes, listening to my family laughing downstairs about wedding plans. It felt unreal, like I was already gone and they hadn't noticed. I wasn't leaving to punish them. I wasn't leaving to make a statement. I was leaving because staying meant erasing myself. And the scariest part wasn't walking away without money. It was realizing how easily they would replace me once I was gone. I left on a weekday morning because I knew no one would be paying attention. The house was loud with routine, my dad's news playing in the living room, my mom moving between rooms, my brother asleep after another late night out. It felt almost cruel how normal everything was as I zipped the last bag. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't owe them a speech they'd only twist later. I wrote a short note instead and left it on the kitchen counter, weighted down with my keys. I need space. I won't be contributing financially anymore. Please don't contact me for a while. It was the most honest thing I'd ever written to them. My heart was pounding as I carried my bags to the car. Every sound made me flinch, convinced someone would come out and stop me. No one did. When I finally sat behind the wheel and closed the door, the silence was deafening. I just sat there for a second, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing like I'd just escaped something dangerous. I drove away without music, without a plan beyond the address of a cheap place I'd arranged last minute. Halfway there, my phone started buzzing. Missed calls. Texts stacking up. I didn't look. I couldn't. If I heard their voices, I knew I'd turn back out of guilt alone. When I finally checked later, the messages were frantic. "Where are you? This isn't funny. We need to talk." Then my mom, "You can't just leave like this." But I had. And the strange thing was, once the fear faded, something else took its place: relief. Heavy, shaky relief, but relief all the same. For the first time, my absence created consequences. They felt the loss of access to my money, my time, my reliability. And it scared them. I spent that night alone in a nearly empty room, sitting on the floor with my back against the wall. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't secure. But it was quiet. And in that quiet, I realized this wasn't the end of the conflict. It was just the moment they finally noticed I was gone. The next few days were chaos on my phone. Calls from numbers I didn't answer. Voicemails piling up. Messages swinging wildly between panic, anger, and sudden tenderness. My mom went from "You're breaking this family" to "Please come home so we can talk like adults" in the span of an hour. My dad left a voicemail that was all heavy breathing and frustration, ending with, "You're making a huge mistake." I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I'd never done before: I protected myself without asking permission. I went to the bank and closed the old account completely. The teller looked at me with mild concern as I explained I needed to remove all shared access immediately. Signing those papers made my hands shake, but when it was done, I felt lighter, like a door had finally locked behind me. I transferred what little remained into my new account and set up alerts for everything. No more blind trust. No more access. Then I sent one message. Just one. I'm not paying for the wedding. I'm not discussing the money again. Please respect my space. That was it. The fallout was instant. My brother called first, furious. Are you serious right now? He snapped. Do you know how much trouble you're causing? I told him calmly, you spent my savings without my consent. He laughed like it was a joke. You're really gonna die on this hill? Yes, I said. And I meant it. My parents were stunned, not because I left, but because I didn't come back begging. They'd expected guilt to pull me in, like it always had. Instead, they were met with silence and boundaries they couldn't cross. A week later, my aunt messaged me quietly, the wedding plans are complicated now. That was the first crack. The first sign that my absence had weight. I sat alone in my small apartment reading that message, my chest tight, emotions tangled, relief, grief, fear, pride. I didn't feel victorious. I felt raw. Exposed. Because while they were finally facing consequences, I was facing something else entirely. The realization that cutting them off didn't magically erase the damage. And that healing was going to hurt in ways I wasn't prepared for yet. I used to think the hardest part would be leaving. I was wrong. The hardest part was the quiet that came after, when there was no one left to argue with, no one to prove myself to, no crisis demanding I be the responsible one. Just me, alone with the aftermath. At first, the guilt came in waves. I'd wake up with my chest tight, my mom's voice echoing in my head, family doesn't do this. I questioned myself constantly. Was I too harsh? Should I have handled it differently? Years of conditioning don't disappear just because you walk out the door. But slowly, something else began to surface. Peace. Not the dramatic kind, just small, steady moments. Cooking a meal without being interrupted. Checking my account and knowing no one else could touch it. Falling asleep without dread sitting in my stomach. For the first time, my life felt like it belonged to me. I rebuilt my savings quietly, dollar by dollar. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't fast, but every deposit felt different this time. It wasn't about proving I was useful. It was about security. About choice. About knowing that if I fell, I wouldn't be pushed deeper by the people who were supposed to catch me. My family tried a few more times. Apologies that never quite included responsibility. Invitations that came with expectations attached. I didn't fight them. I didn't explain anymore. I just said no. And something strange happened when I stopped chasing their approval. I stopped missing it. I realized that love that requires you to shrink, sacrifice endlessly, and stay silent isn't love, it's control. Walking away didn't make me heartless. It made me honest. I don't know what my relationship with them will look like in the future. Maybe distant. Maybe non-existent. I've learned not to force endings or rewrite them to feel cleaner than they are. What I do know is this: losing my savings hurt. Losing my family, in a way, hurt more. But losing myself would have destroyed me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't choose what was expected of me. I chose what was necessary. And that choice changed everything.